to get things going with maybe a little bit more general question, because this is such a fascinating culture that you're portraying. So why don't you tell us about some of your background that led you to know about it at all, and in knowing the real person that the film is based on.
So I went to the Central African Republic 12 years ago to cast a film about a man from the Ituri forest whose name was Ota Benga. Really a sad tale of turn of the 20th century America, where Aboriginals were brought from all over the world to the World's Fair in 1905. And he was one of them. And he then had this patron who left him at the Natural History Museum in New York. Then he was put in the Bronx Zoo. Then he was rescued by African Americans and brought to Virginia, where they tried to Christianize him. So it was a kind of, my idea was that we would see the beginning of our industrial experiment through the eyes of somebody from the forest who was completely other. And I was really proud of the script, and I went to cast and found someone, and then I began to have doubts about putting this forest pygmy through the same thing that Ota Benga had been put through ostensibly in the winter of New York in 1905. So I met, Louis was the translator for that, and I then went back to Louis and said, Louis, what if we found a story that was more like a slice of life here, that had you as the protagonist, but as much as possible really showed what life was like for the Bayaka, both in the village and in the forest. And so Louis said, well, I have this memoir, and I don't know if it's any good, and I don't know if I can find it. It's in my mother's story. So long story short, we dug it out, and I read it, and I laughed, and I thought it was really kind of wonderful that he was not the great white hero coming to save the Bayaka from the Chinese logging interests or whatever, that he was this, fairly self-effacing character who just loved these people, loved this place, and wanted as much as possible to live with them and be with them and be as much like them as possible while being a tall, gangly guy from New Jersey. So that's how the story came about.
Okay, as I continue to see some hands here, I'll bring this to you.
I wanted to know, why did you cast Chris Marshall for the role?
I like his physical comedy, and I knew that we needed somebody who, there's not a lot of text in this film, so even though he is a British actor, and British actors do insist on text, and his way of getting into the role was to learn OKA. He learned a lot of OKA, and he really was proud of that. But I liked that he had physical comedy. I liked that he had that British kind of workman-like attitude towards acting. It's my job. And I was really worried if I had, we were thinking of a couple of other actors, that they wouldn't be able to hold up. It was a really tough shoot, and Chris was so sick sometimes that he would just be lying on a bench, and I would say, Chris, you don't have to be here. You can take a day off. You can be sick for a day. And he's, no, it's my job. Call me, when you're set up, I'll be there. And he just, had this incredible fortitude, which I think is part of that British training. They are really workmanlike, and he was really great that way.
Let's see, someone, Carol, yeah?
What was your biggest challenge in making the film?
I think, let's see, the biggest challenge also in the end was the easiest part, and that was having the Bayaka, who were non-actors, come through, and not only just in terms of being able to act, because they are natural storytellers and performers and musicians, and I had some confidence, especially after we worked with them for a month, that was going to be all right. But I thought that once they were paid for 2 weeks, and they got their pay at the end of the week, that was more money than they'd ever seen, and that they would just say, that's great, now we have some money, and that was fun, and, it'll be boring to continue, and we're going to go to the forest and hunt. And there we would be with the crew, inventing another story without any Bayaka. And that was a real possibility, and I was really sweating that. And so a couple of weeks in, or 10 days in or so, I felt them sort of decide to do it. and it was palpable. I don't know if other people felt it, but they just kind of got into gear, and there were a few key actors that made everyone really take the project seriously. And so that was, in a way, it became easy. On other levels, we were 16 hours from the closest, big town, and that 16 hours was fairly dangerous in terms of bandits and accidents and so on and so forth. The only high-tech thing we had was a toy helicopter, and the guys bringing it had an accident on the road, and one of them was, really badly hurt and had to leave. So that kind of thing, just getting to and fro was fraught. The producer was really amazing, but the government people tried to shut us down basically every other week, and so the producer was constantly shuttling back to Bangui and doing diplomacy and so on. But luckily I didn't have to think about that too much, because he was taking care of that. But